Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. In this session, I will talk about ethnography of communication. I hope and expect by the end of the session, you would be able to understand the concept and the other concepts that are related to it. Well, my dear students, when we talk of ethnography of communication or ethnography of speech, the first name that comes to our mind is of Hymes. He was one amongst other sociolinguists such as Erving Goffman, John Gumpers, and Suzanne Erwin Tripp. These were all the people who worked in the Saperian tradition of sociolinguistics and tried to place language beyond the boundaries of linguistics, putting it into the social context. When we talk of the times when this idea of ethnography of communication or ethnography of speech gathered its significance, actually we are referring to the generational shift from descriptive linguistics into sociolinguistics, where, merely instead of describing merely the rules of language or the structures of language or different aspects that are inherent to different aspects or levels of language, such as semantics or orthography or syntax, for the first time there was a shift, from this pure linguistics to sociolinguistics, and people, the researchers and the linguists started placing it into the social context or the cultural context where it is used for certain purposes or for certain functions. We can actually, in terms of time, we can parallel it to something that was happening in the contemporary times, that is the Chomskyan shift to transformational generative grammar. Well, my dear students, the sociolinguistics movement that focused on the social aspects of the language, it expressed continuity with the previous or the prior generations of scholars in contrast to the tradition of transformational generative grammar and structural linguistics. Hymes was particularly critical of the idea of linguistic competence, and he was of the view that linguistic competence in itself is not an idea sufficient to explain the functions that are performed through language and the way language is used by people in real life. It was, in fact, in 1972 that he pointed out that we do more than something what we may call just constructing linguistically correct sentences or grammatically correct structures. In the process of performing language, actually we perform something more than language itself, and the utterances are actually incorporated in the social context where they are used. This was the beginning of the concept of the ethnography of speech, what he termed it as initially, and then alternatively the term ethnography of communication was also used. So, both the terms currently exist simultaneously in the literature on sociolinguistics, and, they mean the same. In a way, this was a new approach because for the first time, it was considered that when somebody would speak a sentence or would utter an utterance, it is the surroundings that would play their role in the meaning-making process. Well, my dear students, ethnographies of communication must discover and explicate the competence that enables the members of the communities to conduct and interpret speech, according to Hymes. And he believes that, what is the purpose of these ethnographies or the studies of communication, according to him, is to explore. He was of the view that the purpose of the linguists or the ethnographers should not be to explore language in itself as an end. It should just be explored as a means how it is used in the social context to create meaning-making process. And according to him, the exploration and documentation of communicative competence within a speech community is actually the essence of what he called, ethnography of communication. And when he was working on this whole concept, there were two ideas that he worked on. He worked on certain social units, and the social unit that he took as the basis for the study of language in the ethnographic perspective was speech community. So, I hope you know what is a speech community. A speech community is a group of people who are identified by two things: a common language, B, the common behavior towards that language. And actually, this is what was a contribution of Hymes, because he pointed out that a speech community should not be defined merely by one language or a particular language that they use. It is to be and it should be defined by the common set of, that one common set of, he says, norms and beliefs and ideas and attitude that this community has towards language use. So, the language use, according to him, is, is labeled by or is identified by the attitude that these people have towards that particular language. And using the concept of speech community in this sense, actually, Hymes then explored how different speech communities use different languages with different attitudes and behaviors towards them and exploit them for performing certain social functions. According to him, then, the study of language must concern itself with describing and analyzing the ability of the native speakers of the language use for communication in real life situations, and he called it social competence. According to him, linguistic competence is not enough. Linguistic competence put into the social context makes the real competence that is required by the users of a language in real life. Because, if I simplify his idea, what he argued was that a speaker may have the ability to use a language correctly, using its grammar correctly, the word choice correctly, pronunciations can be fine, etc. But what to say and what not to say in a particular context, this ability to understand the language use and usage in the cultural context and in the context of the situation is what he terms as ethnography of communication, is what he studies under ethnography of communication. So this, according to him, not only involves the ability the shared knowledge of the linguistic code, but also this involves sharing the sociocultural code, social cultural values, and sociocultural norms. According to Hymes, the ethnography of communication is concerned with the questions of, and I'm, quoting this from him, he says it is concerned with the questions of what a person knows about appropriate patterns of language use in his or her community, how he or she learns about it. So, ethnography of communication would look at all those patterns of social behavior that affects linguistic behavior, and all those patterns of sociolinguistic behavior, how people use language in their own cultures. In short, what I would say is ethnography of linguistics gave a new perspective to the study of language, because it placed language beyond language itself and opened the doors for its examination in the social and the cultural context.